Over the weekend, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying that President Biden's $4 trillion spending plan would be good for the country, even if it leads to a rise in interest rates. Joining us right now is Allianz Gramercy advisor Mohamed El-Erian. He's also president of Queens College, Cambridge. Good morning to you, Mohamed. Before we even get to that, I want to get to the other element of what has happened or what Janet Yellen was doing over the weekend, which is the G7. We were talking about and debating it before, coming together on this minimum tax of 15% for corporations. Do you think this is A, a good idea, and B, is actually going to happen in practice?
So I think it's a good idea. I think it's historic. I think it's a necessary step towards global tax reform, but it's not sufficient. There's so many more steps to do. You've got to get the G20 to sign off on this. You've got the OECD also has to do some work. And then you've got to get treaties passed in national parliaments. So it's a long process, but it certainly was a necessary step, and a historic one, Andrew.
But you think it's real? I mean, you think that in a couple of years from now, we're going to be talking about a genuine minimum tax, not just here in the U.S., but elsewhere? And do you think this can even get approved here? I mean, that's part of the biggest hurdle, perhaps.
So here's the irony. It doesn't change much for the U.S. If you're in Ireland, you have a completely different view of this. If you're in Ireland, this is a consequential move that you are against. So I do think you're going to see the low-tax jurisdictions having enormous pressure placed on them to increase taxes. But here in the U.S., we're not going to feel much.
When you say an island, are you talking about, I mean, there's Ireland, which is an island, and then there are the Cayman Islands, which have a completely different tax rate?
Yeah, both. I mean, there's lots of low-tax jurisdictions that have been arbitraging high-tax jurisdictions.
So why would they ever participate in this?
Because of the pressure that's going to be imposed on them. These are small economies, and it's very hard to oppose a G7, G20 initiative. So they're going to go along, but they're going to go along in a very grudging fashion and find other ways to maintain their competitiveness.
Right. Mohamed, I also want to talk to you about interest rates and inflation in particular. There was a piece over the weekend on Bloomberg called a $4,749 bike hints at inflation peril looming for the U.S. economy. If you try to go out and get a bicycle today, it costs so much more than it used to. Are we measuring inflation wrong?
So that's a long-standing debate, and it depends whose inflation you're measuring. But we're going to have higher inflation numbers this week. Consensus is looking for a headline inflation of 4.7%, a core rate of 3.4%. These are high numbers. They're not going to resolve the debate as to whether it's transitory or not. You know my view that it is not transitory, that there's elements that are going to stay. But we are in a higher inflation world as far as I'm concerned, and the Fed risks being caught behind. But for now, markets will remain calm. It's what we talked about last week. It is the sweet spot. You have booming demand driving recovery. You have corporate pricing power being significant, even though wages are going to go up. And you have a Fed and an ECB that are very calm about the whole thing. So this is a sweet spot for markets right now.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.